I'm Brett Malone.
I'm Angelica Malone. And we have 2 daughters, 4 and 2 years old.
Yeah.
Great.
Oh, yeah.
When did you get married? How long you been married?
Almost 10 years. We got married in 2007, August 3rd.
Yeah. In South Carolina.
Goose Creek, South Carolina.
Yeah, so we lived in a suburb outside of Charleston, South Carolina, or it's like a part of Charleston. But when we decided to get married, we didn't want a wedding or anything like that. We just were like, we want to be together. So we didn't go to like have a whole thing. We're just like, okay, where's the nearest courthouse? And the nearest courthouse to our house was like in another direction. And it ended up being this area called Goose Creek, and that's where we went. We got our marriage license, and like 3 days later.
I remember the judge, I can tell he was just like, whatever, this ain't gonna last.
Old judge, and he was just like, are you sure about this? And I was like, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
He was like, are you sure? Like looking at me like, are you? And I don't know if that's a part of his job, like to do that, but he was just like, all right, let's go. I'm sure he sees lots of couples where he's just like, this sounds like a mess, but
that'll be $40, please.
Yeah. I'll take your money, whatever.
Yeah.
So tell us. So are we gonna go back and forth, or?
Yeah, let's just go back and forth. So you
Okay.
can tell me you are.
I'm Nathan Berry.
And I'm Lucretia Berry, and we were married June 15th, 2002, in Des Moines, Iowa.
Almost 15 years ago.
Yep, coming up
Right.
on 15-year anniversary. So, and we have 3 girls, 10, 7, and 5. So, we are coming up June 12th on the 50th anniversary of Loving versus the state of Virginia. And my, having things change in 50 years. So let's just talk about that. Like how, like even in 10 years for you all, how have things changed in terms of attitudes about your marriage and what you think about your marriage?
So the thing we were talking about before we got on the video was when we first got married, we were both in the military. He's still in the military, but we were both in the military and grew up in military families where there's a lot of diversity in the military. Obviously, it's still overwhelmingly white, but there's a lot of diversity, a lot of interracial marriages. I don't even know the statistic, but it's probably a higher percentage than I think in the general population, just because you're getting people from all around the country and different countries, people from other countries serve in the United States military. So when we decided to get married, it wasn't a really big thing among our immediate population of people. More so maybe with like his family or maybe actually the community of within Charleston. It was something maybe, but
I don't remember anything like that.
What? Within the community?
Yeah.
But I'm saying like more, if there was anything where we would feel any kind of tension or anything, it would be there. It wouldn't have been within like our group of friends or our work environment or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, maybe a little bit from his family, but that was about the extent of it. I think we did know though that we were like, it was not as common. We knew that it was still not as common as like same race marriage or however you would describe it, but it wasn't a big thing. And then also we moved after we were married to New York, and in New York, maybe we experienced a little bit of, when we were looking for a house, we moved to upstate New York. We were looking for a place to live. And I think that there's one person who kind of wasn't comfortable with us and wouldn't rent to us, but obviously it wasn't overt. And then we moved to 2 like kind of remote places where there was already a lot of diversity. We moved to Puerto Rico and then we moved to Guam. So in both of those places, you'll find people with varying skin tones married to each other.
It was funny though, because they view dark skin like it's different. And remember, like we'd be in the grocery store, and these like old Puerto Rican ladies would walk up to Angelica and be like, "Who's your mom?" You know, like
what? When?
Like, because they want to know like who your mom is or who your dad is. Because where'd you get that dark skin? Because they thought she was Puerto Rican.
That, but
oh yeah, you don't remember that? They ask you who you're related to and stuff like that. It's in Spanish, but maybe you didn't understand. But
okay. So it wasn't much, and I would say honestly, the most that we've discussed race and noticed how race plays a part, like in our marriage, is since moving here to Seattle.
And I've been here 3 weeks. It hasn't really been a thing. Like I don't ever remember talking about race.
Not between him and I. I talked to the girls about race and feeling comfortable in their skin, but it just was not anywhere near of a big thing as it is here in the United States. And I think also this is probably our first time being a part of what I would say civilian community outside of military community. So in Buffalo, I was in school, very diverse. We went to a church in the city that was pretty diverse. Then we moved to these islands where there is diversity.
Where
like actually,
majority colored people.
There are people of color. Those with white skin are considered minorities in both places we live. They have terms for them. So here has been the first place, and it's 10 years later, where literally walking down the street and like in conversation, it's come up, and it's definitely something we've had to talk about more.
And so how you mentioned the girls and that you've had to have the conversations because you're in the States. So how have you been talking to them about, for them it's, race and the caste system and the categories, it's probably a foreign concept. So how have you talked to them about it?
So I've always kind of had the same, even before we came here, I would tell them, hey, you are black and white. Your mom is, and I really said that because that's what other people will say to them. Like, hey, your mom is black. Hey, your dad is white. And so I didn't want them to ever feel as though they needed to choose a side. And I know that if you look at my girls, you could assume something about them. You might assume that they are something, one or the other.
Somebody asked me about the Manny yesterday.
They asked him if he was a Manny.
A Manny, yeah, that's right.
Oh.
Like, he's like, no.
I'm like, no.
They're mine.
They're mine.
So I explained that to them. Hey, you are black and white. And, I explained to her about the history of racism. I explained to her that there was a time where people did not like it because your mom had dark skin, or they did not think it was good that Poppy would be nice to me. And like, we talk about things like that. I would say there was a time where, they would say that, oh, you have dark skin, you have to go over there. And very like on children's terms, just so they can get it. But I tell her, I say, there are still some people who do that, but right now that's not really a good thing. People don't do that anymore. Like to let her know it's not appropriate anymore, So that may have been something that historically happened, and you could probably still see it at times, but generally speaking today, that's not something that should be going on. So that's kind of how I discuss it with them like that. And it's very basic, very basic.
Okay.
So do you, for our girls, they're, with three of them, they're each of them have their own like unique skin tone, and so they talk to each other and hair texture, yeah. And so they talk to each other about those differences. But obviously, inside of our home, and because they're related, it's a very like healthy and vibrant conversation. What does that conversation look like internally inside your family?
So there was a time, he's looking like they don't talk about it. So our brothers are 4 and 2, yeah. But
okay, yeah, all right.
Let's go Guam. So Brett is a lot fairer now than when he was on Guam. So on Guam, he was a lot more tan, and his skin tone was similar.
Unfortunately, I'm a lot lighter now.
Yeah.
He likes being tan. I think he also felt more like so though my girls are fair, they still have color to their skin. They are more brown, and especially when we lived in Puerto Rico, Guam, they're definitely more tan and brown. Their hair was lighter, but so the girls and I definitely people never questioned like the girls being mine, and I think that it helped him to feel more apart when he was there because he did have tanner skin, so it looked more how do you say it, congruent. It looked. And now I think it's more evident that, he is not, there's no, he is white, I am black. And so there was a time when we lived in, what?
I'm just listening.
There was a time when we lived in Puerto Rico, or Guam, excuse me, where our older girl would say to Poppy, she was like, oh, Poppy, our skin is like the same. And for her, it looked similar. For me, I was like, there's still a difference. And I would tell her, your skin tone does look very similar to Poppy's. But there will be people who are going to say, you know, no, you're not the same. So I also don't want to create this idea that she feels as though, because what I worry is that she will see herself one way, which is fine. She should have her own sense of self. But that someone one day will try and tell her otherwise, and she will be surprised by it. I don't want her to be surprised by it. So I want her to know, like, you may see yourself very similar to Poppy, but there could easily be someone who's like, no, you are not one of us. You are not like Poppy. And so I'm sure to let her know that, you know, your skin did look similar to his. Poppy's is a little bit lighter. Yours a little bit more brown. And most recently, we've been talking because of what I've heard you do with your girls, like using different like terms and spices and things like that. I've been saying, oh yeah, yours is a little more brown, a little caramel, something like that, so she feels more comfortable how to describing herself.
Yeah. Oh, look at us having a positive influence on people. Okay.
Do you want to say anything to that?
No, I think you hit it. You got it.
Well, in terms of going back to the question of attitudes when we got married versus now, I grew up in the South and kind of, you know my story, very segregated life. And but we got married in Iowa. That's where we met. And he grew up pretty segregated as well because it's Iowa. So
more isolated than segregated.
Right. Exactly. Well, that's what segregation is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we're isolated, because we were segregated by law. And we had some, there was some opinions when we were getting married, but not overt.
Yeah, nothing overt.
Nothing overt. I recognized that a few family members were going through some changes, some transitions, having to think about some things and grow, because, you know, you can say, well, I love everybody, you know, I'm a good person, I love everybody, but then this infusion, this integration, you know, because one really shakes, you know, challenges people to the core, because the whole race ideology and the race construct and the caste system is so strong in our country and so infused into people's identity. And so now, you know, with us getting married, that means that that's an area that typically for a lot of people goes unchallenged, especially if you remain, you know, socially segregated or segregated in your churches or isolated, if you remain that way. But so with us two coming together, that meant other communities, like our families, you know, have to come together. And so there was, like, no one, you know, overtly objected to us getting together. You know, there was that question. Somebody in your family said something about the children.
Yeah.
Right?
Who would they
play with?
Yeah, like how will they identify, basically.
Okay.
Not in that eloquent of a way, but that's essentially what the question was.
Right. And
but most of my family was just excited to learn the electric slide.
That can build
That comes building every black woman the electric slide.
Black, you have to do the electric slide.
The wedding reception, there's that. Yep. And then I watched people in my family. Well, most of everybody, like, you just gotta love Nate. Like, when you know him, you love him. I haven't met a person who didn't love him, who didn't know him. So.
There's a couple people.
I don't know those people. So I watched people who were a little suspicious and doubted, and, you know, but I watched them grow and come a long way. So, and then when we got married in Iowa, we tend to be in communities that are ethnically diverse. So we really have not ever had any outright, like within our communities, objection. I remember we lived in that neighborhood or that area in Des Moines, and that one neighbor was like, he was an older white guy, and he told the other neighbors, I don't like the salt and the pepper. So he didn't
It was a part of the city that had...
What's that? What'd you say?
I said, try to put a little salt and pepper in your food.
Okay. Yeah. So funny. I I mean, and so I just, of course, whenever we saw him, I made sure to speak. Hi, how are you? I just thought that was so funny and ridiculous. And then for us, and then when we moved back to the South, or me returned to the South. When we moved to the South, I was terrified, really, thinking that, there would be constant contention with the Southern, those old things that I had grown up with, because I had not lived back in the South as an adult. But we returned to the South and found that, okay, of course things had changed and there were more families that looked like ours. We actually ended up moving into a neighborhood where, the people who lived beside us, they had a multi-ethnic family. The people around the corner from us had a multi-ethnic family by adoption. Lots of multi-ethnic families by adoption in the neighborhood. So, it was great. And then, we are very intentional about, our children are older, so we've been having the conversation for a while so that, they can stand in their own identity and not have somebody tell them, who they are, or if someone asks, stupid questions, they aren't caught off guard. But at the same time, not putting them in, not allowing them to be kind of cast into those old caste systems of race and skin tone. So that's where we are.
Yep.
Okay, so what is something, I know we talked about, what is something that maybe people ask you or say to you that you think is ridiculous, or it gets on your nerves, or something like that?
Okay, so this is probably, I think for someone on the outside, they would be like, oh, how is that offensive, or how is that rude? But for me, and even Brett for a long time, was like, I don't understand, why that makes you mad. But then we got here, and we get it, tenfold or hundredfold, and I think he started getting irritated with it. People will say, oh, your girls are so gorgeous. Oh, look at her hair. That color. And I'm just like, absolutely, they are gorgeous. But what you're doing, the shade of her hair or the shade of her skin, what you're saying is that she is somehow superior to people with fairer skin and people with darker skin or with kinkier hair and it's please don't do that. Don't perpetuate that idea, because not only do you now make her dependent upon people telling her how beautiful she is, because she's been here, in Lucretia, Nathan, we get it every day, multiple times a day, to the point where I think, I need to figure out some kind of verbiage to say to get the point across. I've started saying, I've heard people say, oh, you can say, but I'm also smart too. But I'm like, no, it's not about the fact, it's not really about the beauty. It's the fact that you're putting this certain type of exotic beauty on a pedestal, which is so frustrating to me.
Right.
Yeah, she does look very different. And it is, I think at times it is shocking. Their hair is almost blonde, but their skin is brown. Okay, that's different. But, and then saying it out loud around other people, I've even heard, there's a really popular podcast I listen to they have a interracial child, by adoption, and they say and then they also have children from another country who are one race, and they say, I'm sorry, but there's just something about black and white children, and I'm just please don't say that. That's not flattering. That's not a compliment. It's not a compliment. And so I guess I wish I could say that to people is, hey, I know what you're trying to say. You think it's really beautiful. But one, they're children. Children are not beauty models. They're not supermodels. They are just children. Two, we don't want to put this idea that there's a certain type of ethnicity or there's a certain, makeup of a person that is more beautiful than others. And it's not a compliment. So I can't really speak for all people who have children that are multi-ethnic or multiracial, but I'm going to just go out there and say that we don't think it's a compliment.
You got that? Not a compliment.
Same.
We can relate. We can relate to that. It's like people are saying, I don't know. To me, it feels more like, I don't know. Oh, poor you. You have this predicament of being mixed race, but you're so beautiful. It kind of feels like that to me. I don't know.
For me, it feels like when people say, people tell me, I love mixed babies, or I just want a mixed baby. You know, like it's something that you can go to the store and pick up.
Get your paint colors.
And
Nate
I also don't really like the word mixed.
Yeah, he's really
nothing
passionate
pisses me
about
off faster than the word mixed.
Yeah, because every child is mixed between a mom and a dad.
Yeah,
that's it. You know, and again, it's because people are so tied. People really believe that we're different races of people, and so even when it sounds like even when you're saying, "Oh, mixed children are so beautiful," it's like you're saying, you know, this concoction of these two species have come together and created something beautiful. And it's like, no, we're all just people. And those are just the genes that they inherited.
Fetishism. It kind of turns into a fetishism.
Yeah.
The idea of having a black one.
Or it's some sort of novelty. You know,
right.
It's like,
yeah. And again, it speaks to the rooted this ideology of race. And so it's like, of course, if you have a person with more melanin and a person with less active melanin, then they're going to have children that look a certain way. I don't know, people just seem surprised by it. I'm like, didn't you pay attention in biology class? There's going to be curly hair, all of these different variations. So, but I guess, it still is a novelty for some people. Or for a lot of people, but for us, it's just normal. Like, this is just what our children look like. And so someone constantly pointing it out, then it reminds me, oh, that's right. We are somehow different to them.
Yes.
Even though we're a mom and a dad, or we're a couple raising our children.
Well, then 100% of the focus is on external appearance.
The phenotype.
So you're not paying attention to the child's personality or their talents or things like that. It's only what they look like.
Or I find that just like when someone looks at somebody with darker skin, they say, oh, because they perceive when you have before you say anything, they perceive because you have darker skin, you'll be a certain way. Then when you begin to behave differently or speak differently, then that's another layer of shock for them. Well, now I'm curious to find out where you're from, where you go to school, that's another thing. That's a whole nother conversation, but it's a similar.
Yes. Here's another thing this is what I learned, and I didn't know this for a long time. When people say, where did you meet? Or, oh, I want to hear the story of how you met. I just thought people were being authentic. And then I'm like, well, I want to hear how you guys met, And then I finally realized that they don't really care. It's not about how we met. What they're asking is, in what circumstance and in what world, did this black woman and this white man be able to get so close that they could develop a loving relationship?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, okay.
And we get that a lot. We've gotten that a lot, and from the very beginning, right? People always ask how we met.
I guess I always thought they were asking how we met.
I told you that's not what they want to know, how we, like you said, how we got close enough, fall in love.
Yeah. We should start saying, we grew up together. We just grew up together. Or we could say something fun. Well, we can say, well, his grandparents owned my grandparents, and so we grew up together.
We worked together. I mean,
doesn't hear you say. He's still shocked that.
I don't get it. We work together. I don't.
Yeah, but because it's ignorant. So.
But I don't.
So he's still on it. What? They don't understand. I guess he didn't know. I'm sure I've told him before.
He did not. I'm telling you.
He did not know. I knew it wasn't authentic when people asked how we met, because they asked first, oh, where are you from? Where'd you grow up? Then how you met. And you don't ever ask those people those questions as soon as you meet them, and we'll get it immediately. And so they were like, oh, so you were both in the military? So anyway, he didn't realize that it wasn't authentic. And then you started telling your story, and she was saying that they're just going to start saying that his grandparents owned her grandparents.
Oh, jeez. Don't say that.
That would be a shocker.
See,
you know what I say now when people ask me if anyone ever asks me if the girls are mine, I say yes, they came out of my vagina.
See, but the thing is, that's the thing. We're so comfortable with this conversation, and we can just say stuff like that. Other people would be blown away. I mean, imagine when I tell people, oh, we met in Iowa. So then people go, what were you doing in Iowa?
Yeah, black people in Iowa?
Yeah, it doesn't have a wall around it. Like, anybody can go.
But also, too, where I live, too, there's a ton of black people. So, it's like, I don't... Like, it wasn't a shocker growing up either. Like, my mom had to have known. Like, when I was, like, a teenager, you know how they have all the supermodel posters in Walmart? Yeah. Out of all those posters, I had a Tyra Banks poster on my wall. He's
got a thing.
All my mom's friends were black that she worked with. When she was a nurse, and so I was around it a lot, and so I don't think it was a huge shocker. And I was always attracted to black women.
But the thing is, he had never been able to date a black woman. So the other thing that I think was going to speak to what you're saying is like, because he was like, oh, they don't let black people in Iowa. You're like, yeah, there's not fences around it. I think what the issue that I have seen, because I get I get enough black women say to me like, oh, I'm into black men, but they'll be married to a black man, or they'll be with, dating a black man. I realize that there are some things that kind of make people feel self-conscious when you're around someone of a different ethnicity or race that keeps them from coming together, even though there's attraction. And I think, I can understand it, because I remember, sorry, that's a fire truck.
We live like right next to the fire department.
Yeah. When early on in our relationship, when I would put a scarf on my head at night. Now, Brett, like for me, it was a little weird at first because I know that, like, I don't think he's used to that. But for him, he was just like, all right, like this is just another chick. This is what she does. She wears something on her head at night. I don't understand women anyway, so it's not that big a deal. But like, I think for a black woman, it can sometimes feel as though like, oh man, I'm not like what he's used to. And so it makes you nervous. Like, because I do remember one time he even said to me, can you just throw your hair up in a ponytail? And this is before I had locks. And I said, no, I can't just throw my hair up in a ponytail.
It was taking like an hour and a half, and I was like, oh, on.
And I was like, no, I can't throw my hair up in a ponytail.
Just whip that sucker up. Let's go.
And that was when I had loose hair. And so I just like, no, I can't do that. So I think that there are some things that keep people from coming together, though they do life together, work together, keeps them from being able to have a relationship, like an intimate relationship, because you're a little self-conscious of yourself and not even really that the other person would mind, because, all the stuff that I do now that I think people think are black people things, wrapping my hair up at night, putting lotion on every day. He's like, that's just my wife. That's not her as a black woman. That's just her.
Right. Yeah, that's like, it reminds me of when we first got married, because we were friends and then and lived in separate parts of the United States, and then we're dating and kind of had this long distance relationship. Okay, so then when we got married, that's really the first time that we are totally in each other's space 24/7. So, and we lived in Florida, so we go out to the pool and he's like, okay, I'm gonna lay here and tan for a while. I don't know the rules of tanning, I don't know how long you're supposed to do it, when you're supposed to turn over. Well, he fell asleep. It was like a long time.
Yeah, like an hour.
I had no idea. So I just covered myself up with towels, like completely covered up with towels, and just laid there to let him do his thing. And he woke up. He was all sunburned, and he's like, "Why didn't you wake me up?" I don't know the protocol for tanning. I think I only recently, after years and years, really understand it. Like, I'm like, do you turn red and then brown? Or I just like peeling the skin off, So yeah, it's like those types of things. Like, yeah, I'm not used to, or he's not, he's used to, of course, being around people who, would understand that back then, And so now we when we go to the pool, we'll find this spot, there's always a spot where one part of it is in the sun and one part is in the shade, and that's our spot. You think
who's in the sun and shade?
I'm in the sun.
Now I'm in the shade. But yeah, I was like, I don't understand the tanning and that whole process. And when we go he's an outdoorsman, and likes to do a lot of outdoorsy kinds of things. And I mean, I don't mind that, but yeah, I'm not trying to get a tan. You know, it took me a while to understand, like, oh, that's a part of the goal of being outside. And I'm like, no, like when I'm outside, I'm just like being outside. So we have to like work that out. We're gonna have to continue these talks and have more conversations like this. But we're going over your time because I know you got to get on. Yeah. But this was great.
Thank you.
Thank you. And happy Loving's Day.
Happy Loving Day. Thank you too.